Hello! So, Nona the Ninth, Day 3. This section is a little bit more eventful than previous sections. The third day of the book has some actual dramatic events occurring. So the first half of the day is dedicated to Camilla, Palamedes, Pyra, and Nona being basically kidnapped from their home by Blood of Eden and taken to the Blood of Eden base. And there they have a conversation with Coronabeth and with We Suffer, who is the local Blood of Eden leader, from what I gather. And then they have a conversation with Judith, who I'd actually kind of forgotten that she's A, still alive, and B, being held by Blood of Eden. That fact completely slipped my mind, even though it was a major part of the end of the last book. Or rather, the sort of like novella, short story thing that came with my copy of the last book, at least. So that was like the first half of the day, and then the second half of the day is Nona and Hot Sauce going to view a broadcast from the cohort, which ends up being a broadcast by Yancey and something that looks like Gideon, but definitely isn't. We'll get to that in a moment. So there's a lot to talk about. Let's start with some of the stuff that has to do, as always, with Nona's identity. So, the beginning of this section is, as always, Nona recounting her dreams to Palamedes. And in this case, the thing that she is recounting is she's holding something under the water, and the thing that she's holding under the water is struggling and trying to come back out of the water, but she keeps holding it down. And when Palamedes asks, what is the thing that you're holding, Nona says, the girl with the painted face. So, Harrow. She's dreaming about trying to drown Harrow. This could indicate that she is Harrow and she's trying to suppress her identity as Harrow, and this is sort of a metaphorical representation of that. It could actually indicate the opposite, that she isn't Harrow, so that she is in fact Gideon. So we are continuing to Muir is continuing to pretty effectively keep giving us hints as to Nona's identity without those hints necessarily actually telling us anything. Like this is not giving me any actual answers as to who or what Nona is. I'm just getting like a bunch of hints that she definitely is, like, there's definitely something very complex going on inside her head as per her relationship to Harrow and Gideon, the other people who share her body. So that's interesting. There's also a very funny moment right after this where she's having a conversation with Pyra about what they both find sexy, which is apparently a word that Nona has heard somewhere, and I don't think she quite knows what it means. And Pyra says that she's into redheads, and then Nona says, I don't think redheads are very sexy. And then, wait, hang on, said Palamedes. That's a very interesting thing you just said, Nona. Let me write that down. that sort of it's like the opposite of that scene earlier in the book where Nona talked about how much she likes boobs. Because obviously Nona talking about how much she likes boobs is a clear indicator of her being Gideon in Palamedes' mind. But I think her talking about how she doesn't think redheads are very sexy is maybe also an indicator of her being Gideon, because obviously Harrow would think that redheads are sexy because of Gideon. At least that's how I interpreted that particular response from Palamedes. So I think Palamedes is maybe getting a ton of evidence, even if it's very circumstantial evidence, of her being Gideon, more so than her being Harrow, which I don't necessarily think is meant to be like a serious indication to us as the readers that she's Gideon. But I think that might be what Palamedes is leaning towards right now. What else happened in terms of the... Yeah, there's another weird thing that happened in regards to Nona's identity, which is a conversation she had with Corona, or Crown, later on. Where before leaving Nona at the school to go be a teacher's aide, Corona says to her, "You, darling, I know what you are, even if they refuse to see it. All I can say, sweetheart, is I envy you more than anyone else in the universe." And that's really interesting. So what does Corona Beth want more than anything else in the universe? She wishes that she had been eaten by her sister. She wants to be one with Ianthe. She is terrified of being alone as herself. At least that's what was established in Gideon the Ninth. And even though she's joined Blood of Eden, I am still under the impression that, like, that's still a thing that haunts her, and that's still something she wants on some level. So I'm inclined to interpret this line through the lens of that desire, which would mean that this line, "I envy you more than anyone else in the universe," might indicate, to me at least, that Corona Beth thinks, at least, that Nona is actually some kind of compound being, like a full-on fusion of Harrow and Gideon, that she is not either of them on their own, that she is instead to become one, the way that Corona Beth kind of wishes she could be with her sister. Whether I'm right about that or whether she's right about that, I don't know. That's sort of just my read of that line. That was a loud vehicle. What the hell was that? That wasn't even a car. I don't know what just passed by the window. Anyway, let's talk about the two big scenes now. So the three big scenes, really. So the first big scene is the meeting with Corona and We Suffer and the We Suffer's bodyguard, whose name I'm forgetting, but who Nona calls Two Thigh Machetes. So, first of all, Corona Beth, I had previously wondered whether Corona Beth being referred to as Crown in this book was a case of Nona's brain automatically translating the name Corona, or if it was a case of some kind of code name. It turns out it's neither. It turns out Corona Beth has taken on a Blood of Eden style name, and her name now is Crown him with many crowns, thy full gallant legions he found it in him to forgive. Coronabeth, or Crown, I'm sorry, I just have to say this. Cringe. That's cringe. Your new name is cringe. That sucks. Go back to being Coronabeth. I mean, it's a cool sounding sentence, but it's just a really weird thing for it's really like a very performative, like, ooh, I'm now part of this new group, so I'm gonna take on this cool new name. This isn't a criticism of the writing, by the way. I think Coronabeth is supposed to come off as a bit cringe with the name here. At least that's how I'm interpreting it. But yeah, definitely very, very weird thing to do. Change your name to something like that. Anyway, so the meeting is interesting because they talk about essentially trying to open negotiations with the cohort, and we learn a little bit more about the situation here. So the planet that they are on, a New Row, is kind of under siege by the cohort, except not really, because the cohort can't really actively come into the planet and do anything because of the resurrection beast that's floating up in the atmosphere. Or at least necromancers can't come into the planet. So it's kind of a weird stalemate situation, and obviously what Blood of Eden wants is to evacuate the planet, from what I gather. Maybe. I think their goal is to evacuate the planet. Or maybe it's to get the cohort to just leave. That's also a possibility. I'm not 100% sure. It's because we have Nona's very sort of limited viewpoint, in the sense that she doesn't really care about the larger political picture and doesn't spend a lot of time thinking about it. It's very hard to piece together what is actually happening, like what is whose goal. My impression is that we suffer, and her faction within Blood of Eden want to negotiate with the cohort to give them the Sixth House people that they have in their custody, and in exchange for giving the cohort the Sixth House people, they want the cohort to either allow them to leave New Row or leave New Row alone as like an independent planet. The latter would definitely be a taller order and harder to get, so I doubt that's plausible, but I'm not really sure what the goal here actually is, because again, it's told to us in very vague terms. And then there's the other faction who basically wants to fight the cohort to the last man. Like they want to, like they don't want to keep the hostages alive. They want to kill the hostages, kill the cohort, fight everyone, fight until the bitter end. Which is obviously not ideal. As for what the cohort wants, we don't know, although we do get a bit of an indication towards the end here, which I'll talk about in a minute. But yeah, that whole meeting is very interesting because of how little it actually tells us. Like, it's a whole meeting about the current geopolitical situation, but because it's all filtered through Nona, we actually get very little usable information from it, and I think that's really interesting. This book in general does something interesting in relation to Harrow the Ninth, because Harrow the Ninth is a book which gives us a very limited point of view, and a flawed point of view, because Harrow in that book is a highly unreliable narrator. She does not perceive reality the way that it actually is, for reasons that are very complicated but make sense at the end. Like, she's basically lobotomized herself in order to change her own perception of reality, and as a result, for most of the book, we aren't entirely sure what's going on because of that. in this book, it's not so much that Nona's perception of reality is skewed, as it is that she just doesn't care about the same things that we as readers might care about because of her limited experience and knowledge of the situation. And so she focuses on the wrong things, and that makes it really difficult to get useful information out of her point of view, which is a really difficult way to write. I'm very impressed by it. I do hope we get some... I do feel like we're getting close to the point in the book where we're gonna just start getting, like, some concrete information, though, because we got some here. We got, like, it's a lot clearer what the situation is now than it was in the previous 2 days. Then there's the meeting with Judith, during which Judith says a bunch of very ominous stuff, which apparently only Nona hears. Everyone else hears screaming. But what Nona hears from Judith is, where is it? Let me find it. Dust of my dust, such similar star salt. What they did to you and what they wrung from you and what shape they made you fill. We see you still, we seek you still. We murdered, we who murder. You inadvertent tool, you misused green thing. Come back to us, take vengeance for us. We saw you, we see you. I see you. My gut instinct is that that's the resurrection beast talking. That's Varun, the Eater, or whatever. Varun the Eater, was that what he was called? Yeah, that my gut instinct is that that is the resurrection beast somehow speaking through Judith. And that's why only Nona can understand it, because it's already been established that she has some sort of rapport with the resurrection beast. I still don't have enough information to make any further guesses about that, but I'm keeping it in mind going forward. Anyway, let's move on to the next important scene, which is Nona and Hot Sauce go to the cohort broadcast. And there, the broadcast is being presented by Yanthe. And Yanthe introduces herself as Prince Yanthe Nabirius I, the Lictor Prince, the Saint of All. So, she's a prince now? I'm trying to remember. I don't think that was a title that any of the other lictors had. I don't think any of the other lictors were called princes. So that might be a new thing. Maybe the Emperor is doing a new thing because now he's basically out of all of his original lictors. In fact, the only lictor he has left is Yanthe, I believe, unless I'm forgetting something. Right? Yeah, Yanthe is literally his last lictor. So maybe he's decided to, like, upgrade her titles, I guess. So we have Yanthe, and she presents a very, very harsh ultimatum about the whole planet surrendering, and if anyone on the planet doesn't adhere to the surrender, then the whole planet will be treated as being, as having broken the agreement. And really the content of what she says, I think, doesn't matter as much, so much as how she says it, which is that she very clearly doesn't really have any sympathy for the people of New Row. She doesn't care. She is presenting this as, like, a very, very high up person in the Empire, and I don't think she's... I think she has, like, zero empathy or compassion for anyone on this planet, and she's barely holding in her, like, disdain for the common people below her. Which makes sense as a character development for Yanthe. She's always been absurdly ambitious. I mean, she's the person who literally murdered one of her closest friends immediately after finding out that it might give her power and status. So, yeah, that tracks for Yanthe. The actual important thing in this scene, however, is that Yanthe then points to the person sitting next to her and introduces this person as Her Most Serene Highness, Crown Prince Kiriona Gaia, heir to the first house, the Emperor's only daughter. And even based on that sounds like it's Gideon, because she's the Emperor's only daughter. But also, it's very clear from Nona's reaction that it's Gideon. Like, Nona recognizes this person from her dreams. And I believe it says that she has red hair. So apparently... Yeah, I don't know what to make of this, because... What became of Gideon's body? Did anything? I'm trying to remember. Do we know what happened to Gideon's body? Because obviously that's not Gideon. Like, Gideon... like, whoever Nona is, she's in Harrow's body, and so is Gideon. Like, Gideon can't possibly be, like, chilling on the Mithraeum with Ianthe and John. And also, she doesn't speak, and she basically seems, like, dead and empty when Nona looks at her. So clearly that's not Gideon. I guess my question is that Gideon's actual human body, which is being necromantically puppeted by John? Or is it just some kind of hologram illusion something? My gut instinct says it's her body just because that would be more gruesome, and that seems like the sort of thing this series would do. So yeah, I don't know what to make of that. Anyway, while this is happening, Nona has this weird moment where she hesitates about going to the meeting, to the projection, and then this happens. "Once you've stepped in," said the voice in the back of her head, "you're in. This isn't the hokey pokey." And Nona immediately sort of clocks this as being important to who she is, like to her prior identity. And I don't know what it means. So my first thought was, this might be a quote from one of the previous books that, like, some character said, and that might give me a hint. So I went through both of the EPUB files for the previous two books, and I searched the words hokey pokey, and I couldn't find anything. Maybe it's spelled differently in the other books, or maybe it's just not there. I don't... So as of right now, if this is a line from the other books, I can't find it and I can't remember it. So I don't know if I'm supposed to be getting some major insight from this line that I'm missing. Yeah, I don't know what to make of that. The other thing that happens here is we get some very weird stuff with the angel. Like, extremely weird. So the angel, whose name is apparently AIM, the angel shows up with her very mysterious driver, who refuses to show their face. And also doesn't have a gender, like they're referred to as gender neutral here. So while the angel and her driver are taking Hot Sauce and Nona back home from the rally, from the viewing of the projection, Hot Sauce at one point says about the angel, "We love her." And then the driver turns to the angel and says, "Now I see. Chance to be her, huh? A little independent living for once?" To which the angel says, "It is my enormous privilege to be they." Just drive. I don't pay you for your opinions. To which the driver says, you don't pay me anything. I'm here for my bloody sins. That's a weird interaction. That's a very weird interaction. So, obviously the angel and driver are somebody. I don't know who, and I'm very confused. My gut instinct is that they surely have to be like some characters we already know. Because that's just how narratives work. Like, if there's someone with a mysterious identity that's going to be revealed, it's probably an identity that we're already familiar with. The problem with that is that, as far as I can tell, every single character who has ever been introduced is accounted for at this point. Like, is there anyone who isn't either A, dead, or B, whose location we definitely know right now? And I don't think there is, unless, again, I'm seriously forgetting something. Well, I mean, there's John. We don't know where John is, but I'm assuming he's, like, on the Mithraeum with Ianthe, probably. And it would be weird if this was John. So let's assume it's not John. There's a part of me that wants to say that the angel might be Ianthe somehow. Like, maybe that's not the real Ianthe in the broadcast, just like it's not the real Gideon. But that's based only on this line, like the whole, oh, you want to be her? No, I'm proud to be they. First of all, I don't think the they thing is meant to indicate gender necessarily, because Nona seems to have a very, very good sense for people's genders. Like, she does not have any trouble identifying people's gender no matter what they look like. She consistently genders both Palamedes and Pyra correctly, for example. So I doubt that Nona would keep calling the angel she after this, if this was meant to indicate that the angel uses they them pronouns. So I don't think it's that. I think that if my crazy theory about the angel somehow being Ianthe is correct, then the driver meant you want to be Coronabeth, i.e. you want to be beloved by everyone, like your sister. To which Ianthe, as the angel, might answer, no, I'm proud to be they, meaning Ianthe plus Nabirius, like the two people that make up the person who is now Ianthe. That's a huge stretch, though, so I don't know that I would go for that one. The other option I can think of, and this is based purely on the fact that these are the only other characters I can think of who aren't technically accounted for, is there's the little gang of cavaliers who went to fight the resurrection beast at the end of the previous book. It was, I believe, Ortus the Ninth, maybe Protesilaus the Seventh, if I'm remembering that correctly. And what's his face? The character from Ortus's epic poem who got conjured out of oblivion. Can't remember his name. But either way, those three are technically unaccounted for. Like, we don't know what ended up happening to them. And technically, so is Gideon the First. By which I mean the lictor in whose body Pyra currently lives. Because there have been several hints throughout this book that maybe Gideon isn't dead. In part, no one in Blood of Eden seems to believe Pyra when she says Gideon is dead, and they seem to indicate that they have some extra knowledge that Camilla and Palamedes don't have that makes them doubt her. And that makes sense because both Gideon and Pyra were extensively involved with Blood of Eden in the past. So it's possible that Blood of Eden has some knowledge about Gideon the First, and that Gideon the First is alive, and maybe that's the driver or something? I don't know. And if that's the driver, and he's in his proper body, that would explain why Pyra is missing at the end of the chapter. She has not come back because she is currently Gideon, and she's off serving the angel. I'm in completely speculative, like insane off-the-cuff theory territory here. I have no idea what I'm talking about. So I'm going to end it here. I'm just going to sort of leave it at that with the mystery of the angel and her driver. And I'm not talking about I'm still not talking about the little bits of John's backstory that we get in between the chapters, because I feel like there isn't really anything like a juicy enough hole there for me to sink my teeth into. So I'll eventually talk about that. And when I do, I'll probably talk about it sort of backwards throughout the book, as opposed to just the parts that are in the part of the book that I'm talking about in the video where I talk about it. That was a nightmare of a sentence. Anyway, that is all I have to say about day 3 of Nona the Ninth. Now it's time to read day 4. Good luck to me. This is a headache-inducing book, I'll tell you that. Bye.